Futurism cannot happen if you don't go inwards to go outwards.
Welcome to Earthly Bonds Podcast, the loving planet dialogues that explore health from brains to biosphere for creative, resilient living. I'm Ryn Delpapa, a NeuroArts Tech founder, leader of the Art for Climate Resilience program in Houston, and host of this podcast. Earthly Bonds Podcast is an initiative supported in part by Changemaker Exchange as a fellow in their 2025 Changemaker for the Planet program. This podcast is for general informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. Always consult qualified professionals for personal advice and do not delay seeking care because of something you've heard here. Guest opinions are their own, and we do not endorse products or companies unless clearly stated. Some episodes include sponsorships or affiliate links. By listening or watching, you agree you're using this content at your own risk. Full disclaimer can be found at earthlybonds.com/disclaimer. Quick pause to answer, what is Art for Climate Resilience? It is Art COMETS' flagship 7-month community arts and health research-backed program that explores how communities can imagine, adapt, and care for a changing planet. You can learn more or reach out at artforclimateresilience.com or check out the show notes. In today's episode, we'll be exploring and going in depth with futurist Rimma Boshernitsan on futurism versus foresight, her triad of intelligence model, and exploring planetary nervous systems. Are you ready to listen? Rimma Boshernitsan is a futurist, strategist, and the founder and CEO of Dialogue, an interdisciplinary strategic advisory that helps leaders stop reacting to the zeitgeist and start shaping it. Over the course of her 20-year career, she has served as a strategic advisor and thought partner to CEOs of emerging businesses and Fortune 500 organizations, including but not limited to Apple, Tata, Roche, Google, Kaiser Permanente. She has worked internationally, including in Moscow, London, and throughout the US. At the center of Rimma's work is a model she's calling the triad of intelligence: human intelligence, machine intelligence, and planetary intelligence. Her work on co-intelligence focuses on how societies, institutions, and leaders make wiser decisions. She explores how human intuition, ethical judgment, and living system awareness must evolve alongside technical capability if innovation is to remain coherent, evidence-based, and humane. I'm so excited for you to go into this conversation with us. So in today's episode, you'll be hearing about all of that and more.
Thank you. Looking forward to our conversation.
First thing I wanted to hone in on is one word that was in that beautiful bio: futurist. Can you tell me how you came to what futurism is, if you could describe it for our audience, as well as what it means to you?
Yeah, totally. I came to it because my clients started calling me that. It was very much about anticipating, understanding, and contextualizing. And I think my normal kind of MO after being a management consultant is always about risk mitigation, right? Like you naturally think, okay, what can we do so that it lands and is successful? Not every client can think about, like, what can we do so that we have the best possible outcome from a wider sort of lens. So I think when we started kind of having multiple conversations, it started with one client and then I mentioned it to another client, and then the other client's like, oh, that's actually a good idea. You should put that on your profile. And I've seen that before and I like what it means. And I struggled with it for a long time because I think that it's a label that's misused a lot right now, especially because I've also been seeing various different professions that are not normally futures focused appropriate the label and use it for internal roles versus, and not like futurists in residence, but more, communications, marketing roles where somehow this person is responsible for that kind of thinking. But I don't know actually if that thinking is happening in that way that I understood futurism to be once I started actually researching, like, what is it that we're doing and how did I naturally fall into this? There's a difference between forecasting and foresight and futurism, in my opinion.
Ooh, break it down.
From a foresight perspective, there's a methodology that's very tightly executed. It's a very specific way of looking at signals and how those signals translate into possible futures. And I think that for me, the difference between futurism or being a futurist and being a foresight practitioner is the wider kind of capacity, like the wider net that's being cast to be able to synthesize things that are not naturally, like maybe synthesizable, or things that are not
Mm.
necessarily like trends or signals, but they are inputs into the broader conversation. And so for me, it's also, this practice is so much about intuition. It's mostly intuition and then partially science to some end. But I do think that foresight is mostly science, and then maybe intuition plays like a small part. I mean, people could just, completely disagree with me, but
Of course.
from
Yeah.
what I've seen and from practitioners who I've spoken with, especially because we have an Institute for the Future here in California, there's a lot of people that work there or go through their programs. And there's, of course, like different types of like educational kind of platforms where you can learn how to be a foresight specialist or a strategic planner and all that. And those three things do not mean the same thing to me at all. So I see myself as a dot connector, as someone that weaves ideas together, that looks for signals, but also kind of senses into what I'm seeing and feeling. And then that naturally comes into like a language for me. And I think there is a parallel with foresight as well in that sense as well. But I don't know that the exacting sort of approach is what I would use necessarily in my practice. I mean, and mostly just because, I mean, look at what happened with COVID, right? You could never have predicted that would have happened. And then you have your 10-year strategy, and like literally 5 of those years are thrown out because it doesn't matter. And then the whole thing changes. So I think after that, I realized, I'm like, it doesn't, we should be thinking one, max 2 years ahead, and things are turning over so quickly. So what is the possibility in the near future, and what does that near future mean for the decisions that need to be made today? And who do I need to really bring on board so that we can get the thing done that we need to get done? We still want to be really practical in terms of like, what can they do today?
Mm.
And it's good to dream. Like, I'm pro dreaming. But I do think that foresight is a very rigorous methodology with specific ways of getting outcomes. And I think futurism leaves a lot up to the situation, which is so much more organic and much more freeing for me as a practitioner, and something that I enjoy. I enjoy both, but it depends on who you're working with, you know?
Very valid. And of course, the direction that they're seeking to gain from either working with a consultant, but also that kind of future lens, right? So it sounds like the breadth and the strengths that you bring on are your systems approach to futurism that pieces all of this together, which is probably a reflection of your very unique background. So I'd love to kind of ground people in your expertise more with how that shapes in dialogue and what that means with your intelligence framework too.
My expertise is really around creating possibility. I think
Mm,
part of what I do really well is bring in things that are not obvious and don't necessarily seem obvious into conversation, so that we can expand how people are thinking about the work that they're doing, the decisions they're making, the products they're launching, and so forth. And I've always been that way. Meaning I've been like that in my personal life, like at a dinner table, and I'm the same way and curious in the boardroom. I'm always the person that's going to say, well, what about this? And have we thought about that? And those two things may go together. We should be thinking about it.
it's a strength to be that curious.
Yeah, but also to kind of synthesize quickly, like what I'm seeing,
Mm,
and then being able to translate that. I think that's the other thing that I'm really good at is facilitating very strategic moments of epiphany, so to speak.
yeah.
And not to say that everything, like every time my mouth opens, someone has an aha moment, by no means. But I do think that when I see things are connecting, I'm very excited to bring to the table. At the same time, I'd love to see my clients make those connections themselves, so that I'm not just giving them the answers either. Of course, like, I'm industry agnostic. There's a through line across all the things that we're doing. But generally speaking, part of what I think is really important is just to have the exposure and understand, like, based on exposure, like, what's possible. And part of that is also not being scared to go inwards, right? Because it's so easy to get signals from outside of ourselves, right? But there is so much wisdom inside. And what might resonate for me may not resonate for someone else. And that's also really important, right? To check in and say, okay, does this make sense? Because I can have, I don't have a science background, but I do work with scientists. And sometimes my intuition says one thing and whatever they're speaking about says another. So I get a lot of, I also have to like check in with myself around like, do I ask this question now because it feels to me that we're going in that direction? Or do I allow for whatever they're talking about to emerge? And it's very infrequent that something, if I don't double click on it, right? If I don't listen to myself and don't actually act on, then something might not emerge that otherwise would have. So I also think that there's a big part of the strength here is tapping into the intuitive capacity as well as a person to be able to surface things maybe otherwise would have been so slightly under and maybe not even ever up on the surface, so that people can consider, are they the right things to do or think about. So that's my strength. And then the framework really comes together. This kind of methodology sort of crystallized for me in 2024. I was at a Planetary summit in Venice, and um I realized, I'm like, oh, I've been working a lot on intuition, and I've been also working a lot on AI with some of my clients, and transformation and augmentation and agentic and all these things that that we're starting to come into the mainstream. And then when I came to the Planetary Summit, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I wasn't thinking about the broader system that we're part of. I was, but it was like the system, and then here we are. And then I realized, oh, actually, no, it's all cohesive. It's all one thing that is actually all connected. And I started researching, how is it connected? Are people actually utilizing, the human intuition, machine intelligence, and this planetary sense making that we can actually have? We have a lot of science behind it. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of technology that can be used in different ways. Are we actually using it? And I did find some case studies, and I was like, okay, this is enough to go off of to say that this is actually a better way of co-evolving than it is to just use our intuition without any sort of interpretation or input from other kind of ways of being able to gather information. And then at the same time, if we're only using data, we're also missing out on other parts of what we're able to do. So in a way, the whole thing kind of came together. I'd been working in this way organically already for years. And then it just gave me language and frame and like uh, a way of speaking about what I'm doing. This might resonate. And it actually felt to me a lot more ahead than we were. And so then I started developing this like language of what I'm trying to, call my own version of co-intelligence, co-evolution, co-consciousness, and collective intelligence. Actually, is that this is the true collective intelligence, I think.
Amazing. Thank you. And that unique intelligence also sounds like it's interdependent on each other. The framework, from the consciousness to the intuition to the types of intelligence, and an article that you shared, which speaks to planetary nervous system. Can you share what planetary nervous system is? And the question really beyond that is, did you have to have a regulated nervous system before you could imagine a planetary nervous system?
Me?
You.
I don't know that those two things are necessarily linked. I mean, yes, a regulated or nervous system
Yeah.
is, lends itself well to many things, and definitely being able to have the space and time to think, for sure. And I highly recommend having a regulated nervous system as a person and someone that
Let's hope.
has that most of the time. I would say maybe 90, like 1 or 2% of the time. I'm not regulated, but I'm generally
I
pretty
mean, who
regulated.
is? Life is a constant ebb and flow, and
Yes.
neutrality is an aspiration, but it is not true existence to be in that state.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. Yes, because we're always on a kind of thinking and on alert and whatnot. The planetary nervous system. I wrote this article, not really like, I don't write with an outline. I kind of have a mental model of like, okay, here's the direction I think I want to go. But sometimes that what I want to say actually emerges at the very, very end, which I think is common for a lot of people. With this particular article, I started writing about the nervous system without surfacing that it was a nervous system in a way. So what I'm doing in the article is actually linking human machine and planetary intelligence and saying, like, there's an analogy here. Human intelligence is kind of the integrative cortex. Machine intelligence is the rapid reflex, and planetary intelligence is the foundational body. And
Mm.
I wrote in a way first, sort of just putting the three out there. I'm like, what is it that I'm talking about here? How are they connected? Why are they connected? And then I realized that they're actually interdependent, to your point. And there is a system here, and there is an analogy to our nervous system. So if we think about it as a whole, how are we actually What's the sum? What are the parts? And how do they come together? And that is the premise of the article, is sort of showing that the thesis is that there's a planetary nervous system
Hmm.
and should think about how do we belong to it? What aspects of it benefit us to understand more deeply? How might we use data in a way that maybe we weren't thinking about before, or even ancient wisdom as data, or things that are not necessarily tangible, but are there for us to understand, there for us to tap into from a sense making perspective. Where might we actually have gaps so that we could see and create the data that may be used by others who are looking for data to look a certain way versus
Hmm.
others who don't need data to look at it a particular way, but are just going to use it anyway because they have the tools or the capacity to be able to access it that way. I did a lot of research around where in the world could we say that this triad is actually at work, that you could sense how it's sort of evolving and how it is within a system. And then I brought in case studies around different things that are happening in different geographies, like in Africa and the Okavango Delta. I've cited philosophers and different kind of scientists and different both neuroscientists and cognitive scientists and people who are in the wisdom space. Sort of how are they, like, what's the difference between how they're using this nervous system within their own fields? And then, of course, like cities and different ways that cities are actually kind of coming together and thinking about this as well in terms of how do we get, the inputs that we need to create the experiences that people want or may not even know that they want, but they can be created so that the experience of living is better, right? And this is all to say that, like, this is a basis for and foundation for the next evolution of my work. And I'm not sure if my work is going to look like consulting. I'm not sure if it's going to look like research. It's sort of, I'm really open to it. This article kind of opened up a whole door for me to think about all of the work that I've done over the past 15 years and how that fits into an umbrella in a way where we're linking things that are seemingly non-linked but are actually interdependent to show that interdependence naturally happens without us being conscious of it. I mean, it doesn't. The other piece too is, I've been in the inner workspace for a long time. And that's always come into the work that I do with my clients because, like I said, like futurism cannot happen if you don't go inwards to go outwards.
Hmm.
And in that as well, I have a practice that I've developed through facilitation of with people and groups. We can access ways of that people have experienced somatically their lived experience based on things that have happened to them in their past. I do that in boardrooms with my clients to help them kind of cross a chasm or get over something or like let them step into an unknown world with confidence or command a room with power and intelligence. The point is that I've been exploring sort of the intuition and human intelligence space for a really long time. So like when AI came online more broadly, and then we started seeing this sort of opportunity for planetary, not only sapience, but also planetary intelligence to be used in concert with everything else. I just felt like, wow, this is actually finally all these little things that I've been studying on the side, they're all coming together and it all is making so much more sense to me because I can see how everything connects. Others might not, but this article was basically me saying, okay, here's literally like case studies to prove that this thing exists. It's not just my intuition. There is
Hmm.
actual data there. So hopefully that was a very long answer to your question.
No, that's great. I mean, I think that's the interesting thing is for many people who probably haven't yet read the article, now they have this awareness of not only your creative process in creating it, but the pieces from your background that kind of evolved into it. And it sounds like just like any in-depth exploration of intelligence that you've also been evolving what it means for your business, evolving how you're articulating this communication and framework style. So that's amazing. It might be an incredibly new topic for certain leaders to even be talking about planetary intelligence. What kind of barriers are you maybe encountering, or how would you encourage leaders to wire their own planetary nervous system today?
Mm. I would say that well, it's not so much that they have their own planetary nervous systems. They have a nervous system, but we live in an ecosystem. So it's not
Mhm.
just us, right? And so then how do you think about yourself as being part of the larger sort of sphere?
Exactly.
Um, and I'm not, when I say planetary, I think people right away think climate or they think like a very like specific thing about the planet, you know, like maybe some sort of planet science of sorts, right? And I'm like, no, I mean, the planet has sensors. We've got so much that is there that is natural to where we live, and has been here for a long time, and we're just discovering that it exists. And at the
Mm,
same time, we have created technology that helps us track all of these amazing things that we could link now. It's more about imagination, honestly, and
mm,
saying like, how can I imagine myself being part of a bigger picture here? What does it mean for my company in the larger context? Is it helping species connect to each other? Is it helping? What are we learning from, you know, birds, from whales, from, you know, different things? Like thinking about whatever we are producing as a
mhm.
team or an organization or even as a person, and how does that link or enhance or benefit from that we could bring in? Because I would say, you know, interspecies communication, for example.
Yeah, break that down. I've always been a little bit confused by is like, what do we actually mean when we're talking about interspecies communication?
Well, I don't know if I'm the right
Mm.
person to answer this question. To me, I could just say for me, and I could be completely wrong here, it's about understanding how specific or a species of animals or
Mm,
plants or living systems communicate with one another. Whales communicate, birds communicate, and so and the living systems outside of humans understand that communication. There is a
mm,
proven scientific ways that we've tracked that these things are happening. Mushrooms have communication. Trees talk to each other. There's so much that we don't necessarily think to tap into that has a lot of meaning for us, that we kind of just live and hover above and just enjoy our
mhm,
lives and think about the material things that, you know, that mean something to us, that get us from point A to point B and allow us to live a comfortable or life and age. But there is more out there than we are tapping into. And so I think I would encourage people who are making decisions that impact many to think
mm,
about how those decisions could be enhanced by additional inputs, right? Even like, you know, in the article, I open up with like a case study around navigation and like, and whale, it's called Whale Safe. It's based in
mhm,
in Santa Barbara, where I actually went to college. And part of making correct decisions was also like, is listening to multiple systems that are coming online. Yes, your data, of course, and technology, but then there's animals that are talking, and there's meaning that has in terms of like the way that boats turn and different kind of things connect, and different sensors, you know, communicate to each other. So I think that it's just more about broadening the aperture around what we're using as inputs for our ways of existing and what we're putting out into the world. And I think that's the only thing we can really do. I'm opening up a lens. This is how I'm thinking about it,
mm.
and I welcome people to step into that and say, like, can that affect my world and what I've been thinking about? Yes, it is about as simple as staying curious, but I also think it's actively allowing ourselves to imagine and not just staying in our lane. I think that's the other thing too, is like, you know, capitalism has not just capitalism, actually, communism, socialism is kind of the same thing, sort of produced this linearity and this very specific operational flow of like, this is how society works. If this, then that.
Mm,
And I don't think the world works like that. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
sure, there you could put if this and that on everything. You can have a linearity to a process, you can have logic, it all makes sense, of course. But what if all of that was just not like, what if you just had vastness of information and
yes.
ideas?
There's a phrase that you used when you were articulating what it meant when you were in the space of widening the lens of the aperture. And so that widening of the lens, it sounds like when you're in communication on this framework, you're bringing people in and asking them, what do they see, right? Is there something in your work that you've found resistance on
Mhm.
oftentimes confuses people?
Well, I think what confuses people is how the work gets done.
Okay.
I think that confuses people too, because I sometimes people that I work with are just all about process. They want to know how is it going to
Yeah.
happen, and the organic nature of the thinking, right, and the generative kind of dialogue as part of the process is hard for them to trust. So it's been interesting over the past decade that I've run the company to be able to say, you know, to sort of prove that the methodology of how we approach curiosity and imagination and deeper sort of thinking works. So I would say
Mhm.
there's like always been challenges there, especially when we work with leaders who may consider themselves being less creative than they actually are.
Mhm.
And so tapping into an unknown part of who they are is like is part of the work, and it actually brings a beautiful side to the whole thing. But they may not. the surface that we're doing that intentionally, because if they themselves don't believe that they're creative, then using those words or getting them, to be something that they think they're not is a whole thing. But
Absolutely.
part of bringing everybody to the table to be able to create together and to imagine a different future and the possibility, and also how do you implement, how do you operate, how do you like influence within the company. There's just a lot of intuition and organic ways of like melding and bringing people along and kind of buy-in and all of this like typical consulting stuff. But I think we have to do it even like more than, because we are gaining trust as we are also expanding people. And so it's a very interesting kind of dance that we have to do. But I would say, so the question about the planetary piece, the article, what was the question that you asked about that? Like that
It was
tied to
about
this?
defining or clarifying what technosphere, biosphere, symbiosis meant. I chose the one
Yeah,
with the most words.
sure. I mean, yes. I mean, it's pretty heady. And it's just a different, just different words for different things. But I think it matters and it doesn't,
Mm,
because uh the whole point of sort of linking these ideas together is to say that like here's a proposal for how we might think bigger. And here are all the ways that these puzzles fit into each other.
mm,
You can do it horizontally across, like, here's all the three pieces, they're coming together this way, and not go too deep. But if you go deep and more vertical, then you get into the techno bio and all of that and the symbiosis between all of them. There's a lot of research around the biosphere and the technosphere, and linking those ideas is not that hard, actually. It's quite like, it's not to say the research exists with all of it together,
mhm.
although there are definitely overlaps. But it's pretty clear that like once you look at once you read the article, once you see the data, it's clear that these things kind of all come together. So it's the I guess what I would urge people is not to get intimidated by language and to just look at the broader ideas and allow them to mean something for you in the life that you lead. Right? I'm not saying go and become a climate scientist or a technologist or a scientist or an intuition expert and a meditator. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying we have these things, they're in front of us. We now have a way to
Mhm.
link them. What can we learn from the interconnectedness of all of it? And what would that mean for our existing interdependence and the way that we might evolve as humans in a system that sometimes is binary, but it doesn't
Yeah.
is not actually binary. And so how do we get beyond that binary to be able to live a more full and interesting existence? And that means not just for ourselves, but it means in the context of the ecosystems we're part of. And we're all part of ecosystems, right? You could
Mm.
think about it on a company level, or you can think about it on a species level, you can think about it on a family level, whatever it is. We're constantly part of collectives, and we are not alone as individuals on this planet. Certainly we can live that way, but we're not actually alone.
If you're listening to this and thinking, my team needs this kind of conversation, that's exactly the work that I do outside of this podcast. Through Art Comets, a global health studio, we work with health, education, and government organizations to improve community well being through climate resilience, creative health, and green workforce training and programs. If you'd like to bring a workshop or talk like this into your organization, head to artcomets.com, ARTECOMETS.com, or click the link in the show notes. There you'll find a short overview and form to explore what might fit your organization's context.
And I don't mean aliens. I mean literally there's many of us and we are all connected somehow, right? As a
Yes.
species and so
Yeah.
forth. So that's how I think about it. So the terminology I feel is great to have, especially for the ones that love some language, but I wouldn't discourage people from getting involved with the article or any sort of thinking in this capacity, because it only can expand. And so it's
Mm.
just about allowing yourself to meet yourself where you're at and not having expectations that you should be knowing these terms and how they're connected or not connected or whatever.
Beautiful. Wonderful way of closing on the ecosystems that we all live in, and to not be afraid to learn, to embrace terminology that we're not always comfortable with, that is new perhaps. So thank you, Rima, for showing up, sharing your beautiful article with us, as well as diving into the co-intelligence framework. How can people stay connected with your work? And is there anything that's coming up that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, there's always something coming up. My work, I write a weekly newsletter on Sundays. You can sign up on the website. It's in-dialogue with a GUE, in-dialogue.co. This kind of work has made me much more curious about certain things that are happening with the planet that are maybe not discussed as much in like the mainstream. And then we continue to do a lot of interesting work with clients, and it's amazing. Like somehow I'm like, I know it's not super clear what we do. I mean, yes, it's clear in the sense that yes, we know we help clients get ahead of the thing that's coming at us, but it's not always clear to people what that means for them and what can
Mm,
they do tactically today to work with us. And so we continue to be asked to sort of facilitate very strategic conversations to like help bring influence into different stakeholder groups and contextualize the thing that they're thinking about in a different way. And I'm now like this article's kind of launched a little bit of a speaking moment as well. So I'm also coming into organizations and making sense of the article in the context of what it means for business. So very much kind of tapping into all of that right now and really looking forward to like putting an outline for my book together, finalizing the one I already have and seeing like
amazing.
where could that go. We'll see what happens. But yeah, that's just been what's coming. That's what's coming up.
Yeah, you have some beautiful creations ahead. I'll make sure that we pass that along to everyone in the email as well as the show notes so people can stay connected with you. Thank you for sharing your breadth of knowledge. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and sharing this podcast. It means the world to us. If you'd like to engage with us further, you can reach out to us at earthlybonds.com. Our next conversation is going to dive into this, our brains. So stay tuned for episode 3.